When I was trying to come up with a list of speakers to share with you this evening, I racked my brain trying to figure out how many different entities are there in Waller County, especially in Precinct 1 in Hempstead, Texas, that all have some amount of significant influence. If they don't have the influence, they should have the influence in the community. And what if there would be a way that I could let these various and sundry different individuals talk about anything they wanted to talk about, anything that would promote the common good of Precinct 1 in Hempstead, Texas. And so I compiled a list, and if I do this again, the list would be bigger. But I'm going to start this evening by asking Ms. Mary Ann Piacentini if she would come forward. I think I saw her just walk in. For you that don't know Mary Ann is the Chief Executive Officer of the Katy, Prairie Conservancy. And she's engaged in the business of trying to preserve a portion of this beautiful part of Southeast Texas that we inhabit. She does a real good job. She stays abreast of the positive things that are happening and the negatives as well. I'm going to ask her to come up here and talk about the High Lines, the bullet train, and the Highway 36 road to nowhere. Thank you, Mary Ann.
I get the fun stuff. Is it on? Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. As John said, I am the director of a land trust, and the land trust currently owns about 20,000 acres of protected land, of which about 8,000 is in Waller County and about 12 in western Harris County. And we started saving it because of the birds. The snow geese, which aren't here as much anymore because of the rice, but also a lot of the waterfowl. But we also are saving it for people, because sooner or later we're all going to be run over with subdivisions and lots of traffic. I drove out here. I told John the reason I was late was I left in plenty of time to get out here. It's taken me 2.5 hours to get here. Every single road that I tried to manage to get on was just miserable. There are just too many people, not enough options. But we hope that if we get to our goal, whether it's the full 50,000 acres we want to save or it's just the 20 we have saved so far, that it's going to be for the enjoyment of people. We have a wildlife viewing platform at Warren Lake that's open 365 days a year, and it's open from dawn to dusk. That's in Harris County, but in Waller, where you don't currently have any parks, we are opening up a 1.5-mile trail at our Indian Grass Preserve. It will be surrounded by beautiful wetlands and grasslands, so people can see what the Katy Prairie looked like before European settlers came here. And it's also going to eventually have a Prairie Discovery Center where we can help kids become more aware of why it's fun to be outside. Your children, if you live in Waller, probably still get the opportunity to occasionally roam by themselves. Most kids who live in urban areas don't get that opportunity, and we want to give it to them. But because we have so much contiguous acreage, and because it's such an attractive nuisance to the rest of the world, lots of people look at it as a bullseye. They look at it as a target. So we have all three of the things that John mentioned: a bullet train, transmission lines, and a highway that could conceivably go through our property. So I wanted to give you a sense of where the projects were on all of those, and then to encourage you to make Waller your county, regardless of whether you agree with what we're doing or you're on the other side is fine, but you live here, you care about it, and we want to make sure that, and you're here today, so obviously we know you care, but that all the people in Waller County get an opportunity to participate in a planning process to decide what they want Waller County to look like. It's not for me to decide, even as a large an agency that has large land holdings. We want to be a participant, we want to be active, but we also want to, follow the values of this community, which we think has both great natural assets and cultural assets. So I'll start with the transmission line. I think most of you know that there is what's lovingly called now the Brazos Valley Connection, but was originally called the Houston Import Project. And I think they don't want to call it the Houston Import Project anymore because everybody knows it's just bringing power to Houston. Now, don't get me wrong, I live in Houston. I work out here, but I live in Houston. So it's not that I don't want power, but there are a lot of people that are very concerned that it's basically bringing 2% of the power from Dallas down to Houston. And one of the questions is, one, is that a good idea? Two, it's very expensive. It's a $600 million project. And three, how long is that excess power going to last? When is Dallas going to need it? So we've looked at all the lines. 4 of the 5 lines go through the Katy Prairie Conservancy's land. 5 of the lines all go through Waller County, and not all go through Harris County. It's going from the Zenith substation, which is in Harris near House and Hall Road, up through to the Gibbons Creek, which is in Grimes County. That's the substation there, and then the Limestone substation, which is in Limestone County, right north of Leon County. And there are a lot of people who are not very happy with it. There's a group in Waller. I think T.J. Johnston is leading that. And then there's a group in Grimes. David Tullis is leading that. And then there are lots of individual landowners who are trying to stop the lines, change the lines, do something different. And I think you should know that CenterPoint, which is doing the southern half of the route, is going to file its permit application more than likely to the Public Utilities Commission tomorrow on the 22nd. That means from that date, if it's filed, you have 45 days to go ahead and to decide that you're an affected party and you want to intervene, so that you would be a third party to the lawsuit. We are going to be an intervener. We have already started gathering expert witnesses. We believe that our expert witnesses will be able to talk about the conservation values, the sort of natural resources of the community that would be impacted by the roadways. There are other experts that are going to be talking about safety. It is a high intensity 345 volt line. It is they're 151 feet high, either monopoles or the kind of Christmas trees. That hasn't been decided yet. Monopoles are very expensive. They usually don't go that long a route, but that is possible that they could be. We still feel like they're not good for people and they're not good for habitat for wildlife, but it's also the case that there are people who have indicated that the new analysis, modeling analysis that looks at costs and looks at impacts and need, would give a different opinion if it were done today, as opposed to when they did it, when everybody expected that oil prices would stay over $100 a barrel and there would be lots of people continuing to come into Houston, the Houston area. And there certainly are a lot of people, there's no question. But you should also know that Calpine and NRG, which are gas generators, have filed a lawsuit for this against it, saying it's unnecessary, it's too expensive, it's needless. Also know that when these lines are built, when you're doing a transmission line, it's basically the ratepayers who will pay it. So if you are a ratepayer for CenterPoint or anyone along that line, you will ultimately pay for this project. Whereas generation is different. They have to build the generators, but then, of course, they charge for it, but it's not subsidized to the extent that transmission lines are. Now, you may love it, and you may decide you want a transmission line. That's great. You have every right to do that. But if you don't want it, you really do need to make sure that within 45 days you either join a group that's intervening or you decide to intervene. We already have our own lawyer. We're already trying to identify ways to work with Waller County and Grimes County as well, in addition to what we're paying for our own lawyer. And we've got people that we're working with who are going to bring in routing experts. We've got people who are going to bring in reliability experts. We hope that Calpine and NRG, which have much deeper pockets than a poor little nonprofit does, are going to bring in experts that are going to talk about the need, and that we'll all be able to piggyback on that. I think the Grimes County people are working with NRG and Calpine already. So That's where it is right now. If you go to the Brazos Valley Connection, you will get the information that Centerpoint chooses to give you. If you go to SaveOurPrairie.com, which is a KPC-driven website, you'll get information on ways you can get involved. I'm assuming that Waller and Grimes County also will be having websites. If you also just Google it, you will find both positive and negative aspects of it. So I encourage you to become informed and to decide, is this good for Waller? Is it something that you want? And if it is or it isn't, get involved. Don't just let your neighbor get involved. There is the next thing I'll talk about is the bullet train, because I don't want to take all night, and that is it's been determined, at least by the Central Texas Railway, or Texas Central Railway, that they are selecting the site that will go along the utility corridor. So that means, again, it will not go through, it will go through not our lands exactly. It's about a half a mile to the northeast of the Warren Ranch, which is one of our signature properties. It's 6,500 acres. We co-own it with Jim and Nancy Warren. It is often thought that bullet trains are quiet, they're fast, they're all that good stuff. I've had people ride bullet trains in France and Japan. They have a lot of vibration, they have a lot of noise. There are a number of pieces of legislation that have been introduced in this session, one of whom is from our own Senator Kolkhorst, Lois Kolkhorst, and she is trying to ensure that the high-speed rail cannot use the powers of eminent domain to actually condemn property. It is a privately funded railroad. It is not publicly funded, but they had gotten approval to use the powers of eminent domain, and Senator Kolkhorst, she wasn't representative, Senator Kolkhorst is trying to stop that. There's also some other legislation that I'm going to have to read. I didn't memorize it. Senator Robert Nichols has filed legislation that removes companies that plan to build high-speed rail from all of the state's railroad statutes, including eminent domain. So he's working with Senator Kolkhorst too, trying to do it doubled up. Representative John Ray has filed two bills also saying that they cannot use subsidized private activity bonds to build their facilities, which will also hamper them. And Representatives Will Metcalf, Trent Ashby, and John Ray have joined together to file a bill that will require the governing body of a city or county to approve any high-speed rail line that crosses a public street, alley, square, or public property. If you're interested, there is a new website called No Texas Rail. And if you Google that, you can go on it. It's got blogs that you can subscribe to. It's also got a lot of good information. If you're interested in the high-speed rail and learning more about it from a positive aspect from its proponents, you can also go to the high-speed rail at Texas Central Railway, and it will tell you that. KPC has filed comments, as I should have said we did for Centerpoint, about the value of these conservation lands, the value of the habitat. We've also, with Centerpoint, filed a map that showed all the constraints that we could find that were in Harris and Waller County from 10 up to 290. And we show cemeteries, we show schools, we show airports, we show wetlands, we show federally regulated wetlands, and in addition conservation lands, so that's information that we had hoped they would use to not route through the prairie, but of course they did. They disregarded it. So then when they put together the 5 routes, which they will probably put 5 routes in their permit application, they can't just go with one. The PUC requires that you have multiple routes when you submit a permit application, but we did file comments for them too. And ultimately you should know that the PUC has, I think, something like, when I was at the Sub-Regional Planning Commission, I think they have something like 37 criteria that they use to determine where a transmission line should go. It's not just cost, it's reliability, it's does it impact any residences, all kinds of things. So you should go on their website and determine that, because it can help you with your comments as well. Last but not least, from our vantage point, since 1985, there's been a roadway called the, I think that this is kind of interesting that's called this, but the Prairie Parkway has been on the Waller County Major Thoroughfare and Freeway Plan. And there was really not a lot of traction for it. In 2009, Houston-Galveston Area Council did a study that said the road really wasn't needed. Waller didn't have the population, it was going to be a road to nowhere, and it was going to, couldn't be a toll road because it probably couldn't be supported. And so then Highway 36A came along, and they're a coalition of municipalities, counties, engineers, road builders, planners, who port people, highway people, who want the road to go from the Port of Freeport all the way up through Hempstead and ultimately to Waco. It is essentially a truck route. It will be bringing freight from the Port of Freeport all the way up to Waco. One of its biggest drivers for that, of course, is Dole and Chiquita for green fruit that will then be brought to other distribution centers. There is also the argument that it's an evacuation route, although the official evacuation route is Highway 36, and TxDOT is working on expanding Highway 36 below 10, and there are plans, it's a priority to expand it above 10 so that it actually can handle evacuations of hurricanes. I think most of you know now, having gone through, I guess, Rita, that our judge now wants us to shelter in place, so you won't be having huge droves of Harris County people coming through to Waller, because it was horrible. Horrible for you, horrible for us. And I didn't, at that time, nobody was saying shelter in place. It took us 17 hours to get to Austin. It took one of my staff members 23 hours to get to Austin. So for Ike, most of us stayed in place except for the low-lying coastal communities, and they were just actually going mostly to Houston. But the Prairie Parkway there are 5 reasons that people want it in this coalition, and one of the other primary drivers is economic development, because basically development follows roads. Roads don't usually follow development, and there are reasons for that. I mean, one is, to get ahead of the curve, to think that people are going to go there. But the other thing is it really does encourage development. And from my vantage point, if part of the parkway is going through the conservation lands, you've lost your economic development there, because we're not letting subdivisions go through a prairie land. We're going to keep it and want it to stay pristine and beautiful and available for our public. But the other thing is that, the citizens of Waller have a right and a responsibility to actually look at what kinds of roads do they want, where do they want those roads. My suggestion to you would be that, and mark my words, we are going to fight the Prairie Parkway being on our lands. On the other hand, I would also hope, and I happen to not be a naturalist or an environmentalist or a biologist. I have a master's in urban and regional planning. So I understand about roads, I understand about development, but I also understand about the value of open space. And one of the things that I would hope that we could all work together is to find the funding, perhaps through HGAC, to actually do a study that helps Waller decide what its future is. Where are its mobility needs? Is it 362 that needs to be expanded? Should it be farther west to 359, which go through many of your cities, that could help those cities develop? Is it just a 4-lane road that's not got just limited egress and ingress? What should it be? But all of you need to weigh into that. You need to decide what your future is. And I think that originally there was a plan for a $2 million study that was going to look at switching not from Highway 36, below 10 it will be Highway 36, but from, I think, Rosenberg up, it would be a new road, which is very expensive, much more expensive than expanding an old road. The study has been stopped. There's no funding. The $1 million for going north from Rosenberg is not available. So that's good news for you, because the other good news is that I think that there are people now at HGAC who are beginning to recognize that there's some power in Waller County, that Waller County is a force to be reckoned with. It needs to be listened to, but you need to make your voices heard. Your judge needs to be at the table for the Transportation Policy Council, or your representative, whoever's doing it. You need to go after money. I know that Alan Clark, who heads up the Transportation Division at HGAC, is looking forward to trying to work with Waller County. My hope would be that all of us would work together so that it's a fair, equitable, scientific study, and it's not beholden to any specific landowners or anybody who says, oh, I can make a buck from this, let me do this, and that it works for your community. I also think that one of the values that you have in this community is all of your open space. And that's pretty wonderful. And it's not to suggest that you can't do what you want with your open space, but you also should recognize that the local food movement, the need for recreation and nature tourism could be an economic driver for those parts of your county that you want to keep rural, that you don't want to turn into what I call the Houstonization of Waller County. And so your cities could grow if your cities want to grow. And they can be your hubs. They can be where your economic centers are, where your business centers are. They can be, you know, still healthy and happy, but they can also be something that is development where you want the development. And, you know, you might decide to, you know, cover it up with subdivisions. But I will tell you that in a lot of the early talks that I gave to people who didn't know much about the Katy Prairie and probably didn't care, but then learned to care about it, learned to love it, I showed 2 slides. And one slide was a beautiful green space that had trails, that had wildlife, that had people in it. And I said, you know, I put up that slide, and then I put another slide that was chock-a-block subdivision. And I said, you can save this, or you can have this. What is it you want? And it's not to stop people from living here. It's not to stop people from having a nice home. It's just that you already live here, and you have an opportunity to try to make it keep it the good place that it is, and maybe even make it better if you want it to be better. I hope that you will go to our SaveOurPrairie.com website. It tries to keep people up to date on what's happening. So if we know that emails are needed or there's a vote coming up, when HGAC was trying to do this $2 million study and we were encouraging not to do it, we didn't stop it, but we had 50 people show up at the meeting, which was, they've never had that before. We had people calling in all over the place and said, we get it, we'll have you be a part of the study, we'll avoid the Katy Prairie, we'll avoid this, we'll not degrade you. But you have to keep on it. It doesn't happen without you. It doesn't happen without your vote. It really is important. And also, if you go on there, I'll make sure that I have links to those other sites that I talked about. And then last but not least, go ahead and join and ask to be on our newsletter list. Ask to be on our Don't Mess with the Katy Prairie list, excuse me. Because we're not going to inundate you. You don't never have to give us a dime if you don't want to. But the newsletter gives you a lot of good information about public policy issues, as does SaveOurPrairie.com. But it also tells you about events and activities. So if you've got kids, you've got grandchildren, and you want to participate in what we're doing, we have some pretty wonderful events. And we hope that you consider us a valuable member of your community, just as we consider you and hope to have you be a valuable member of our organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann.